Okay, good almost afternoon at this point. So when Noah was speaking, he talked about wondering why he had been invited to be on the advisory board. I think I probably was the most confused person when I got the invitation. I'm not a historian. I'm the daughter of a historian, but that's as far as it goes. So I know that I should keep records. My father came to my house at Christmas, and he had a card that indicated how much food they fed me. I was born 2 months premature. So he had a card of how much milk I was given over the first 6 months of my life and how much I grew over the time. And I was born 50 years ago. But he had kept it. So I know you are good at that stuff. You keep records. I am not, this is not what I do. I think I got invited though because I study women's work. I'm a sociologist. For my PhD work, I looked at Ghanaian women traders. So I was doing the work in the early 2000s, but it required me to go back 2 generations. So I was talking to them about their mothers and their grandmothers and the connections between what they did. So in a sense, I do think about the past, but I approach it very differently. At the time, I didn't go into an archive. I mean, now I look at what's already there, what exists in different shapes and forms. But I come very much from sort of creating the material that can then end up in the archives. And over the years, I've come to appreciate research participants not just as people from whom you collect material, but also people who can help you co-create the material. My earliest project was an ethnographic project, so I spent a year and a half literally going to the market, except for weekends, every day. And one of the people who was very good for me she was younger, like myself. She had done sociology as an undergraduate before she chose to work in the market. And we had all these conversations where she would say to me, you know, you're asking the wrong question. You should ask this question instead, and so on. So I came to an early appreciation of research participants or interviewees, not just as people you collect material from, without a sense of what they can bring to the material that you collect. And I also began to think of what are the ways in which I can go and get material from people without them feeling like it's a chore, right? Like, okay, you are from a university, you need it for your work, what's in it for me in this process? So part of why I'm encouraging River of Life as a method now is because I recognize the ways in which it allows the research participants to do something that's fun and interesting. So that even if they don't get anything out of it, they don't feel like this was a painful process by which you get material. So I've done ethnographies, I've done interviews. Somebody asked about life histories. I've done that. I've done mixed methods where I do a survey and then afterwards I do interviews. But increasingly, I'm doing much more of qualitative methods solely, but doing not just the interview, but trying to find more interesting ways at getting at material from participants. And I'd like to share one of the approaches that I use, which in the literature is called arts-based approaches. So what you do in an arts-based approach to data collection is you are getting the interviewees to merge the cognitive and the affective. They are going to tell you what has happened to them, but also how they feel or how they felt about the different things that happened to them. They also use sort of a range of methods to get at that. So it's not just telling you. They can draw, they can dance, they can sing. Whichever way they want to convey the material to you is acceptable. One of the more common arts-based approaches that people use is photo voice. So you give people a camera and you say, document your life as a PhD student. And so you can decide what are the key moments in my life as a PhD student, the library, your supervisor, your laptop, whatever, and then you explain why you chose those objects. People also do digital storytelling, so you get people to put together a short video of their lives, and usually the people who are doing the digital storytelling, they are not experts, right? So it's not so much about the quality of the material, it's about the opportunity to use a different format to share life histories and opportunities with you. So River of Life is one type of arts-based approaches. I first encountered the River of Life, I think it was 2017 or 2018. I was at the University of Sussex, and it was introduced to me as an icebreaker. So it was the first day of a project, and what we did was you had to introduce yourself using, so one thing in your past that was sort of a downer, and one thing that made a huge difference in your life positively. And I mean, at first I thought, what kind of, it's the first day, we don't know anybody, why should I be telling you about my personal life in this manner? But it was very interesting to see the ways in which it opened up all kinds of conversations. And we began to see that as academics, some things actually were downers that were similar. So people talked about their supervisors who were either making or unmaking you based on the way in which they were approaching what they were doing and so on. And so I suddenly began to think this might be an interesting way of doing interviews, right? Not as an icebreaker, but to use it as a way of getting an interview done. So I actually wrote to the creators of the approach, and they are very much NGO type. So they were like, "Ah, you can do whatever you want, you know." Over the years, I've been looking out for who's using it academically and where are the spaces where I can find this used and documented. And maybe there are others which I haven't found, but I've definitely found one by Denov and Shevell, which is why I've put it up there. They are working on the children born out of rape in the Rwandan genocide. So they are working with these young people who don't have fathers, right? The mothers don't know who their fathers are. They were raped and then they produce these kids. And so they write about that whole experience, and they use the River of Life approach. And they talk about using it. I mean, when you read their work, it's used very much for marginalized communities, for talking about trauma and so on. And they focus more on the fact that it gives them a different way of expressing themselves. So obviously, if you are talking to people who've been raped, who are born out of a rape, you want to give them ways of expressing that without it being oral. So being able to draw it is a good idea. I don't use it as a way of getting at things that are traumatic necessarily. For me, it's a way of thinking about your life history and focusing on the major things that motivated but also demotivated you. And because I study work, I'm particularly interested, and I mean, I come at work, so Elena in the beginning was talking about ending at 1970. Much of what I do begins in the 1980s, so I'm very much interested in structural adjustment and the ways in which it shaped people's lives fundamentally. I'm interested in, I mean, we talk about a post-structural adjustment phase. Ghana right now is in an economic crisis of its own. So I'm very interested in sort of crises of different kinds and the ways in which it unmakes or makes you. But I'm also interested in policies and how it improves or worsens your conditions. So when I think about the different women I've studied over the years, I'm interested in what are the markers that shaped your professional life and how did it improve or worsen your conditions? How did you feel about that whole period? How did it impact you and or your family? So I don't see it as something that you use just in terms of sort of for the miserable conditions of our lives. I think you can use it also and talk about the positive things that happened in your life, right? So the way it works, or the ways in which I use it, it's basically before you do the discussion, you allow the person to draw their life history. right? So it's a river. The boulders or the stones are the major blockers in their lives, and then the bridges are the points that help them overcome whatever challenges they faced, or the factors that improve their life circumstances dramatically. So I would give them a sheet of paper, and we just, you draw a river whichever way you want to draw it, and then you leave it to them to indicate what were the major obstacles in their lives, what were the major breakthrough points for them. We use the size of whatever it is that they draw to also indicate the impact of it. So a small stone was a barrier, but it was a smaller barrier relative to a bigger stone. And they determine the relativity of it. So your version of a small stone then determines how big your big stone is. And I don't compare people's stones with each other, because each of them starting from a different point. And similarly, you do the bridges of different shapes and sizes based on what it is that you want to do. The first time I used this approach, I used it with the children of migrants. So I wanted to explore how the absence of their parents shaped them, right? And what other things improved or made their case worse. In the last 5 years, I've used it to explore labor issues in Ghana's creative arts industry. So I've been part of a 5-year project where we've looked at the nation's creative arts industry. We've looked at fashion designers, visual artists, musicians, filmmakers. There's a 5th one, which these days I don't remember things, so you are going to have to just excuse me. I have 4 here, but I know we looked at 5 different groupings. I did the visual artists, and I did fashion designers as well. And then I'm supervising a student who's looking at film. And I know somebody's doing music for sure, but there's a 5th one. Anyways, I've used the River of Life approach for my work with the visual artists and the fashion designers and so on. And then what I've done once I have that is to triangulate it, right? So once they give me their histories, somebody talked about an award they got in high school, for example. So this person now does film, and they talk about an award they got in high school for a drawing that they made. But they couldn't remember which year it was. They remember the person who gave them the award, and so on. So then I went to the newspapers and I put, okay, this is the award, this is the person who gave the award, and then the year comes up. So now I know what year that award was given and that sort of thing. And then I use music. So you talked also about using songs and what songs can give you. So I use a range of other things to do this. And on the right is an example of what it can look like. So there, if you notice, some of the stones have become like rectangles, which is not exactly a stone, but you get the idea. And on there, so it's lack of personal support from family. One of the things that becomes very clear in this work is the ways in which, because creative artists tend to not have regular income, you find that parents are very uncomfortable with children wanting to be a creative artist. They would like you to have a job that you go to every day, and you can tell us how much money you are making at the end of the month, and we can figure out whether we can move you out of our house into another place. When you come and talk to us about being a musician or so on, we don't like it very much. And so you find that the lack of personal support or lack of family support shows up in a lot of the stories. The sizes that the interviewees give them differ depending on whose life it is. But it's one of the things that when I lay out all of the pictures, I can see it come up many times. Then there's sort of compromising school for art, so they can't figure out, should I actually go to school, or I should quit and do my art, or should I go to art school, that sort of thing. So there's also that. And then you see there's a very small one, finances. So finances is a problem, but in relation to the other things, it's not too much of a problem. And then you've got the bridges at different points in time. So COVID, lockdown, education, networks, and that sort of thing. So then we can sit and talk about, okay, so why are these things that you picked up on and so on. I've actually even done it in some situations where we've gone from the individual pictures to doing a focus group. So you have 4 visual artists, they each have their drawings. I talk to each one of them about their drawings, and then we put all 4 drawings together, and they look at each other's drawings and talk about the similarities and differences. And it gives me a very good idea of what the lives of visual artists are like and what things are similar. What things are similar, and so now you can see the picture if at first we are having to imagine it. Okay, so as you can see, there are different sizes. I'm going back a little for those who missed it, right? As you can see, there are different sizes to indicate the size of the problem for people, if you will. And in when I started out, I wasn't using it as a means to then do focus group discussions, but I found that it's a useful way now to discuss and connect similarities and discontinuities between different groups of people. And because it's not text, it's easy for them to connect and discuss them. I've found it very useful in my own work, and I would like to encourage you to think about how to do a life history, but to do it in a way that's more fun, if you will, for the participants. Especially with the creatives, they enjoyed it so much they wanted to do. They said I should teach other people to do this when they come to them, instead of coming to them with a recorder and making their lives boring. I would record eventually, but we would start out with this, and they find it a very interesting way of getting at the same kinds of material that you'd otherwise get at. And so I find now that in my own career, it's because when you do field work in Ghana especially, there's a sense, okay, you are explaining what it's in it for you, but why should they give you 4 hours of their time? What's in it for them? And I find that this is a very good way of saying, okay, there's nothing in it for you, but I guarantee you it's going to be a fun and interesting use of your time. And then it gives me insight into key things, because in focusing on them drawing first, and I give them as much time as it takes, they're able to sort of go back and think on their lives first before we talk about it. Whereas when you are doing an interview, it's sort of like as it comes to you, then they talk about it. And you might have to go and come back a number of times to get the full details of it. I think one of the advantages of this is you give them the time and they think about their lives from beginning to end, and the sort of the key phases or points, and then you do the interview with them. Sometimes as you are talking, they might remember something else and say, oh, I think I need to put in another circle here, and I think I need to put in another bridge over here. But I find that it's sort of like it allows them to do an outline before they write the paper, which is the interview that you are going to do with them. However, it's not always the easiest thing to do. So I'd like to just raise a few things about difficulties that I have found, and then I'll open it up for questions. So you find that sometimes people are reticent because so I've told you it's more interesting, you should use it. I don't generally use PowerPoint when I present. So as you can see, I'm presenting ahead of the PowerPoint. But okay. Some people are uncomfortable because they think, what is this? I should draw. I'm not a good artist. Why can't you just ask me the questions? Why should I Why should I draw? And when that has happened, I've drawn it. I've drawn the river. And when I've tried to make it fun, I'm like, okay, this is a squiggly river. It's big here, it's small there. And I show them that it's not really about what the river looks like, per se. It's just a guide. And in fact, in the Denov and Shevell, it doesn't look like a river. It looks like a box, like a square, and you sort of go from one end of it to the other. So the point really is you want them to have a start point and an end point. And you can use, I suppose it doesn't have to be a river of life. It could be. There's another approach called a tree of life, which is slightly different. But I guess the point is you want them to have, where do you begin this story and where does this story end? So you could make it a road if you like. This is the beginning of the road and the end of the road. And then you might have to help them. Okay, so you want to draw a bridge. How about we draw it like this? So you make the first one with them, have different colors. And then once you sort of get over the initial hump, they are able to do it. I've found that if you are working with non-literate populations, that's when they have this issue about what should the river look like, or older. So sometimes they are literate, but they are older and they just feel like this is a test of my artistic abilities and I don't want to fall for it. So they won't do it. I find that that's an easier sort of problem to resolve. The one that I didn't anticipate when I started to work with the creatives is that they go thoroughly overboard. To the point where it is now, it's like an art piece. And I'm not so sure if the content is useful for my exercise. I actually brought one behind me. There's a fabric. Is it there? I forgot to. Yes. So this one on the right is one example also done by a visual artist who literally, I mean, the amount of time they've got birds. I didn't ask them to put in birds. I did not ask for trees. They actually had the sun, and I cut the sun out of it too. And then there are absolutely no stones. He put the stones next to the bridge, which that wasn't supposed to be the idea, right? Like all your stones and your bridges don't happen at exactly the same time, but according to this guy. So in his case, I said, okay, you know what? You just tell me about your life, because this became an artistic project and not... I also didn't ask it of... so we were working with one of Ghana's foremost visual artists. He's called Ibrahim Mahama. Like Ibrahim Mahama does these huge installations around the world for which he's being paid like $1 million and so on. And in his case, it was just an ethical decision. If we make him draw something, I could sell it for lots of money later on. So we just decided in his case, no drawings, because this is a visual artist whose work is world famous. And anything he draws can be used. If I lose it, then it becomes even more problematic. So in his particular case, we didn't draw it. This one came from a fashion designer. I don't know if you can see it from. And so in their case, I gave them fabrics and paper. And I discovered very quickly that because they were fashion designers, they discarded my paper and took the fabrics instead. Some people would apply the fabric on the paper. This woman, I don't know if you can see what she did. At the bottom here she's got only one. You know, she cut the pieces. Then she put one here. Then she put a bigger one. Then now she made it 3. So it became a fashion project. In her case also. And at first I thought, okay, this represents more problems than here. But as we began to talk, I realized that either she lost the plot or I lost the plot. But between the two of us, the plot had been lost. And increasingly what I think then is that you have to use it with caution. Otherwise it won't work. And perhaps, although I began thinking that with the creatives it would be really fun for them, the problem with them is that then they can take it to places where you don't want them to take it. So it's how do you find a balance between giving people an approach that is more fun, different from what they are used to. It allows them to think about what they are going to tell you in a more chronological fashion before you do it. And then you can work out the details as you go along. But to do it in a way that doesn't go overboard, so you end up with material that you can't quite use because it's become not what you set out to do, but something else. So that's where I'm at currently in my stage of using the River of Life approach. I still am very keen on using it, and I will continue to use it in my future work. And I will encourage the PhD students in this space to think about the ways in which they can use it for their own projects. And I'm open to discussion. So I'll conclude and say, why do I think it's... So it's useful ways of getting a new material, which we can then include in an archive. Right now, I've got about maybe 100 of these in my cabinet at work, right? And I could potentially do an exhibition, actually, with it. And it's just a very interesting visual way of getting to understand the lives of fashion designers in Ghana, or the lives of... and it moves beyond the conventional approach, but allows you to still do the conventional, right? So I don't say just do the drawings and leave it at that. You do the drawings in addition to the interviews. And of course, triangulate. So the archives are useful for giving you information that you can't find in the drawings that they give you. So I'm not suggesting this as an alternative. I'm saying this is one additional way in which you can get material about, particularly if you are looking at the lives of professionals and occupations. And then I guess I just want to encourage you to do them. I mean, for me to get to the point where I'm comfortable doing this, perhaps in presenting it, it seems like a smooth journey, but I had to think about it a lot and about what does it mean to go from what you are taught in graduate school to being comfortable with doing something that's different and gets you at the same place at the end of the day, right? So and these days when students come to me and somebody wants to look at children's games and what they can tell you, I think I've earned the reputation that she's a crazy one. Anything you say, she says it's a good idea, right? Because I come from the place now where I say there's a lot of our history is not necessarily documented. It's not written. A lot of what we do in contemporary periods, we don't necessarily document it either. So if you want to get at that, you have to open up yourself to all the different ways in which you can get material for telling us about our lives and so on. So if there are these children's games where like the children are playing, all these games with their hands, but the words they are using actually, when Obama came to Ghana in 2007, for example, they made these biscuits called Obama biscuits, and it shows up in the children's play. And in a sense, that's how you document the arrival and presence of Obama. But the first time I heard Obama biscuits, somebody was the archivist at Northwestern University was asking me, said, there are no biscuits called Obama biscuits in Ghana. She says there are. And I said, okay, you wait. There's a school. I'll go and find out. And that's how I found out, right? So I'm open to non-conventional ways of doing things. I think that if you document the process by which you get the information that you get at, and you do it in a systematic manner, you just might get information that you didn't know existed. It leads you down paths that you didn't know existed until you allow yourself to go down that path. So I'm going to end here and take questions that I hope I can answer.